The silence inside the cabin of my sedan was absolute. It was the kind of silence you paid six figures for, a hermetically sealed bubble that separated you from the grinding noise of the Chicago highway. I gripped the leather steering wheel, my knuckles white, but my face was calm. It had to be. That was the mask I wore. The mask of James Harper, the architect who had just secured the contract for the new Skyline Art Center. It was the project of a decade. It was the kind of victory that should have had me screaming in triumph, popping champagne, and calling everyone I knew. Instead, I felt a strange, cold knot in my stomach as I turned the car onto the winding private drive that led to my home. I looked up at the house as the iron gates swung open. It was a masterpiece of modern design, a structure I had drawn on a napkin 12 years ago and spent the next decade paying for. Glass, steel, and treated cedar cantilevered over a man-made ravine. It was beautiful. It was impressive. It was cold. From the outside, it looked like the cover of a magazine. It looked like success. But as I pulled into the garage, waiting for the heavy door to slide shut behind me, I didn't feel like a man returning to his sanctuary. I felt like a visitor entering a museum after hours. A museum where I paid the electric bill but wasn't allowed to touch the exhibits. I turned off the engine. The dashboard lights faded, plunging me into semi-darkness. I sat there for a moment, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. 42 years old, graying at the temples, but the suit still fit perfectly. I looked like a man who had everything under control. I took a deep breath, grabbed my briefcase, and stepped out. The click of my dress shoes on the polished concrete floor of the garage echoed too loudly. I entered the house through the mudroom, expecting. What? I didn't know anymore. Maybe a greeting. Maybe the smell of dinner, though Melissa hadn't cooked in 3 years. Maybe just acknowledgement that the person who funded this entire operation had returned to base. The house was dim. The smart lighting system was set to evening ambience, casting long, dramatic shadows across the Italian marble floors. It was quiet, but not the peaceful quiet of an empty house. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a house where someone was waiting. "Melissa," I called out. My voice sounded flat, absorbed instantly by the acoustic paneling I had installed to dampen the echo. No answer. I walked into the main living area. The open-plan design meant I could see all the way to the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the meticulously landscaped garden. And there she was. Melissa was sitting on the white boucle sofa, her legs crossed, a glass of red wine resting dangerously close to the edge of a coffee table that cost more than my first car. She was wearing a silk slip dress that I recognized from a credit card statement last month, a shade of champagne that made her skin look luminous. She didn't look up when I entered. She was staring at her phone, the blue light illuminating her face, highlighting the perfect bone structure that had once graced catalog covers. "I'm home," I said, setting my briefcase down on the kitchen island. Big day. The committee approved the art center design. Unanimous vote. I waited for the smile, the hug. I knew you could do it. Melissa slowly lowered her phone. She looked at me, her eyes sweeping over me with a detached clinical assessment, as if I were a piece of furniture that had been delivered in the wrong color. "That's nice, James," she said. Her voice was smooth, devoid of any real emotion. "Put the wine in the fridge if you opened a new bottle. I don't want it turning to vinegar." I froze. That was it. The biggest contract of my career, the security of our future for the next 5 years. And she was worried about the acidity of a Pinot Noir? I walked around the island and approached the living room. "Did you hear me? I got the Skyline project. It's done. We're set." She took a sip of her wine, her eyes fixing on the dark liquid swirling in the glass. "I heard you. You designed another building. Congratulations. You'll be busy for, what, 2 years? Late nights, dust on your shoes, talking about steel beams and load-bearing walls." She sighed, a sound of profound boredom. "It sounded exhausting." "It pays for the wine," I said, the irritation finally cracking through my professional demeanor. "It pays for this house. It pays for that dress." Melissa set the glass down. The sharp click against the glass table echoed like a gunshot. She turned to face me fully now, and for the first time, I saw the expression on her face. It wasn't boredom anymore. It was contempt. Pure, unadulterated disdain. Sit down, James, she said. It wasn't a request. I remained standing. I've been sitting in meetings for 10 hours. I'd rather stand. What's going on, Mel? You've been distant for weeks, but this is new. Is something wrong? She laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Wrong? No. Everything is finally right. Because I'm done pretending. Pretending what? Pretending that this, she gestured vaguely at me, at the room, at the life we had built, is enough. Pretending that you are enough. The air left the room. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. I don't understand. Of course you don't, she said, shaking her head as if explaining quantum physics to a toddler. You're a simple man, James. You like your straight lines and your blueprints. You think if you follow the rules, work hard, and bring home the check, everything falls into place. But you're boring. You are agonizingly, painfully boring. I stared at her, trying to process the sudden shift. We had our issues, sure. Every couple did. But this felt rehearsed. It felt like a speech she had practiced in front of a mirror. Boring, I repeated, my voice dropping. I built this firm from the ground up. I provide a life for you that 99% of people only dream of. And that's the problem, she snapped, her eyes flashing. You think this is the top. You think this suburban fortress is the peak of existence. But it's not. I look at my friends, James. I look at what they have. Private jets to the islands on a Tuesday. Art collections that actually matter. Husbands who command rooms, not just draft them. She stood up, smoothing the silk over her hips. She walked toward me, stopping just outside of arm's reach. She smelled of expensive perfume and wine. I want a divorce, she stated. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I had feared this deep down in the darkest corners of my insecurity, but hearing it out loud was like being punched in the gut. Mel, I started trying to keep my voice steady. If this is about me working too much, we can fix that. The new contract allows me to hire a senior partner. I can take time off. We can go to the coast. We can stop, she cut me off. Just stop. It's pathetic. It's not about time. It's about you. It's about us. I've outgrown you, James. I was 24 when we met. I was a child. I didn't know my worth. Now I do. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the hardness in her eyes, the calculation. Your worth? I asked quietly. And what is that exactly? She smiled, a cold, predatory smile. A lot more than you have in your bank account, apparently. But don't worry. I'm willing to be reasonable. I've spoken to a lawyer. You have a lawyer, I said flatly. Of course she did. While I was drawing plans for the art center, she was drawing plans for my demolition. I do. And he says I have a very strong case. Emotional neglect, lifestyle incompatibility, and, of course, my contribution to your success. Your contribution? I couldn't help the incredulous laugh that escaped me. Mel, you haven't worked in 8 years. You spend your days at the club and your evenings shopping online. I'm the face of this marriage, she hissed, her composure cracking for a second. I maintain the social connections. I host the dinners. I make you look like a functional human being instead of a workaholic robot. That is work, James, and I expect to be compensated for it. She walked back to the sofa and picked up a manila envelope that had been hidden under a magazine. She tossed it on a coffee table. Here are the terms. I want the house. I want 60% of the liquid assets. I want 40% of the future earnings of Harper Architecture for the next 10 years. And, of course, spousal support to maintain the standard of living I'm accustomed to. I stared at the envelope. The audacity was breathtaking. It wasn't just a divorce. It was a hostile takeover. You're insane, I said calmly. That's not going to happen. You know that. We have a prenup, Melissa. Remember? 10 years ago. My father insisted on it. You signed it. The room went very quiet. Melissa didn't flinch. She didn't look worried. Instead, she took another sip of wine, her eyes locking onto mine over the rim of the glass. The prenup, she murmured. Yes, that nasty little piece of paper. You know, that always hurt my feelings. It showed such a lack of trust. It's a legal document, I said, stepping forward. It protects the firm. It protects the assets I had before we met. Under that agreement, You get a settlement, sure. A generous one. But you don't get the firm. You don't get the house. Is that so? She tilted her head. Well, that would be a problem. If the document existed. My heart skipped a beat. What are you talking about? It's funny, she said, walking slowly toward the fireplace. The gas flames were flickering behind the glass, decorative and warm. I was cleaning up today, organizing things. I found a safe in your study unlocked. You really should be more careful with your security, James. I felt the blood drain from my face. The wall's safe in my study. I had opened it this morning to retrieve my passport for a potential site visit in Canada. Had I left it ajar? No. I was meticulous. I never left things unlocked. Unless she had been watching me. Unless she knew the code. I didn't leave it unlocked, I said, my voice tight. It doesn't matter, does it? She shrugged. The point is, I found a folder. A blue folder. It had such old, dusty papers in it. I thought, this is just clutter, keeping us in the past. So I got rid of it. I moved. I didn't think, I just moved. I strode past her, down the hallway, into my study. I slammed the door open and went straight to the painting that concealed the wall safe. I ripped the canvas back. The steel door was ajar, just a fraction of an inch. I pulled it open. My passport was there. The deeds to the properties were there. A few stacks of emergency cash were there. But the blue folder, the one containing the original, notarized prenuptial agreement with the wet signatures, was gone. I turned around, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I ran back into the living room. Melissa was standing exactly where I had left her, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She pointed a manicured finger at the fireplace. It burns quite beautifully, she said softly. Paper is so fragile, isn't it? Just like trust. I looked at the fire. Amongst the faux logs and the gas flames, there was a pile of gray ash. It was gone. The physical evidence of the contract that protected my life's work was nothing but carbon dust. You stole it, I whispered. You stole a legal document and destroyed it. That's a felony. Prove it, she challenged, her eyes widening in mock innocence. It's my word against yours. Who will the judge believe? The grieving wife who was neglected by her obsessive husband, or the man who's trying to cheat her out of her fair share by inventing a non-existent contract? Without the original, James, it's just a rumor. And in the state of Illinois, without a prenup, everything is marital property. Everything. Still there. I saw a stranger. No, worse than a stranger. I saw an enemy who had been sleeping in my bed, eating my food, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She had timed this. She waited until the Skyline contract was signed to maximize the valuation of the firm. She had planned this down to the minute. You can't afford me, James, she said, echoing the words that would haunt me. You never could. You were just a stepping stone. And now I'm stepping off. She picked up her wine bottle. I'm going to the guest room tonight. You can sleep here on the sofa, or you can go to a hotel. I don't really care. But tomorrow, my lawyer will call you. I suggest you answer. And James, don't try to fight this. I know things. I know about your offshore accounts, the ones you think are so secret. I know about the cash payments to contractors. If you push me, I will burn your reputation to the ground faster than I burned that prenup. I will go to the press. I will tell them you're abusive. I will tell them you're corrupt. Who do you think the media loves to hate more? A crying woman or a rich, arrogant architect? She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the marble, the sound of victory. I stood there in the middle of my perfect, multi-million-dollar living room, feeling utterly dismantled. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. She had stripped me. She had taken my safety net, my pride, and my future, and she had tossed them into the fire with a smile. She was right about one thing. In a standard divorce court, without the original prenup, it would be a bloodbath. It would be he said, she said. And with the threat of false accusations hanging over my head, accusations that could spook the Skyline Committee and ruin my firm, I was cornered. I sank onto the sofa, the same spot where she had been sitting. The cushion was still warm. I looked at the fire. The ashes were indistinguishable. There was no retrieving that document. I put my head in my hands. I closed my eyes. I tried to think. I was an architect. I solved problems. I built structures that withstood wind and gravity. But how do you stabilize a building when the foundation has been blown out? I sat there for an hour, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The darkness deepened outside. The automated lights dimmed further for night mode. Then, a thought flickered in the darkness of my mind. A tiny, structural detail. Melissa was smart. She was manipulative, but she was lazy, and she was technologically illiterate. She thought the world ran on paper. She thought that burning a piece of paper meant erasing a reality. She didn't understand the redundancy of modern systems. She didn't understand that when you build something to last, you build backups. I lifted my head. I looked at the smart TV mounted on the wall. I looked at the tiny, almost invisible lens of the motion sensor in the corner of the ceiling. 10 years ago, when we signed that prenup, my lawyer, Robert, had insisted on a protocol that seemed paranoid at the time. Digital imaging, he had said. Verified, blockchain-encrypted scans stored on a third-party server. But that wasn't all. I looked at the camera in the corner again. I had installed the new security system 3 months ago. High definition, audio recording, cloud storage. Melissa said she found the safe unlocked. She said she burned the paper. If she had done it in this room. If she had boasted about it in this room. I stood up. The despair that had been crushing my chest a moment ago began to evaporate, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. She thought she had one because she had destroyed the paper. She didn't realize that in the world I built, nothing is ever truly lost. I walked toward the hallway, not to the bedroom, but to the server room in the basement. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to fight. I didn't need to beg. I just needed to watch the tape. "You can't afford me," she had said. I paused at the top of the stairs, my hand on the light switch. A grim, humorless smile touched my lips for the first time that night. "No, Melissa," I whispered into the darkness. "The question is, can you afford what comes next?" I flipped the switch and descended into the dark. The game had just changed. She thought she was playing checkers. She didn't know I had been designing the board the whole time. The blue glow of the digital clock on the bedside table read 3:14 a.m., a stark, unblinking eye in the darkness of the guest room. I was lying on a mattress that was too soft, staring at a ceiling I had painted a neutral dove gray 5 years ago for visitors I never really wanted. Now I was the visitor. The silence of the house was no longer a void. It was a weight. It pressed down on my chest, heavier than the duvet, heavier than the exhaustion that pulled at my eyelids but refused to let me sleep. My own home, the structure I had designed with such precise attention to flow and light, had been repurposed into a prison, and I had been relegated to a holding cell. I rolled over, the unfamiliar springs creaking beneath me. My body ached, not from physical exertion, but from the sheer, crushing tension of the performance I had just begun. The performance of the defeated man. The broken husband. It was a role I had to play perfectly if I wanted to survive what was coming. Melissa believed she had incinerated my leverage along with the paper copy of the prenuptial agreement. She believed the ash in the fireplace was the end of my defense. She was sleeping soundly upstairs in the master suite, probably sprawled across the king-size bed with the satisfaction of a conqueror who had just planted her flag on the summit. I closed my eyes, but the image of her smirk burned behind my eyelids. "You cannot afford me." The words looped in my mind like a corrupted audio file. It wasn't just the greed that stung, it was the dismissal. The reduction of my entire existence, my work, my care, my loyalty, down to a balance sheet that she deemed insufficient. I was an architect. I dealt in foundations, in load-bearing walls, in the physics of stress and support. I had built our life on what I thought was a solid slab of mutual respect. I hadn't realized the ground beneath. It was liquefying, eroding silently, while I was busy looking at the blueprints for the future. Morning came not with sunlight, but with the gray, flat illumination of an overcast Midwest dawn. I rose before the alarm, my movements mechanical. I showered in the guest bathroom, the water pressure slightly lower than in the master suite. Another subtle reminder of my demotion. I dressed in the same suit I had worn the day before, having forgotten to grab a fresh one in the chaos of the eviction. As I tied my tie, Looking into the smaller, less flattering mirror, I practiced my expression. Shoulders slumped, eyes averted. The look of a man who is calculating how much he has lost, not a man calculating how to win it back. When I walked into the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee hit me. It should have been comforting. Instead, it smelled like territory. Melissa was there, leaning against the marble island, wrapped in a cashmere robe that cost more than my first car. She was tapping furiously on her tablet, a stylus in one hand, a mug in the other. She didn't look up as I entered. It was a power move, one she had perfected over the last year. If she didn't acknowledge me, I didn't exist. I poured myself a cup of coffee from the pot she had made. I half expected her to tell me to make my own, but she just kept scrolling. "So are we doing this?" I asked, my voice deliberately rough, lacking its usual authoritative resonance. She stopped tapping and finally deigned a glance at me. Her face was fresh, devoid of makeup, and utterly devoid of guilt. "Doing what, James? Living?" "Yes, I plan to continue doing that. Better than before, actually. I mean the lawyers," I said, leaning against the counter, careful to keep my distance. "You really destroyed the prenup. You know that changes nothing, right?" "The law." "Please," she interrupted, waving her hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. "Don't bore me with your legal theories. I spoke to my attorney this morning. Without the original, it's hearsay. It's your word against mine. And considering I have documented evidence of your instability, I think the courts will lean my way." "Instability?" I asked, genuinely confused for a moment. "I've been keeping a journal, James. Dates, times, instances of your emotional unavailability, your obsessiveness, your financial control. It paints quite a picture. A picture of a woman trapped in a gilded cage by a controlling narcissist." I stared at her. The narrative was already constructed. She had been building this case while I was building skyscrapers. The journal was likely a fabrication, written in a week, backdated to look like years of suffering. It was smart, evil but smart. "I'm going to work," I said, setting the mug down. I couldn't stomach the coffee anymore. "You do that," she said, returning her attention to the tablet. "Make money, James. You're going to need it. The alimony payments aren't going to pay themselves." I walked out to the garage, the knot in my stomach tightening. As I backed the car out, I saw a delivery truck pulling into the driveway. A massive box from a high-end furniture designer was being unloaded. She wasn't just claiming the house. She was already redecorating it. She was erasing me while I was still living there. The drive to the office was a blur. I operated on autopilot, navigating the morning traffic while my mind raced. I needed to talk to Robert. I needed confirmation that I wasn't insane, that the digital safeguard we had put in place a decade ago were still valid. My office was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Chicago. Usually, walking into the firm gave me a sense of peace. The clean lines, the models of buildings, the smell of blueprint paper, it was my domain. Today, it felt fragile. If Melissa got her way, if she took 40% of the firm's future earnings, she would cripple us. We wouldn't be able to expand. We wouldn't be able to take on the Skyline project without massive loans. She wouldn't just take my money. She would break the spine of the company. I closed the door to my private office and dialed Robert. He answered on the first ring. "James, I was about to call you. I got a notification from the opposing counsel. They filed for an emergency freezing of assets." "Already?" I asked, sinking into my leather chair. "They're moving fast. They want to prevent you from hiding money. It's standard procedure, but aggressive. Listen to me, James. Did she really burn the document?" "I saw the ashes, Robert. It's gone." Robert sighed, a long, heavy sound over the line. "Okay, calm down. We have the digital copy. It's on the secure server at the firm. It's notarized. It has the blockchain verification stamp. It will hold up in court." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Thank God." "However," Robert continued, his voice dropping an octave, "it's not a magic bullet. If she plays dirty, and it sounds like she can challenge the validity of the digital signature. She can claim she was coerced. She can claim she didn't understand what she was signing. It could drag on for years. And if she pushes this abuse narrative, James, even if we win the financial battle, the reputational damage could kill the Skyline deal. The board won't want an architect who is being dragged through the mud in a domestic abuse scandal. So what do? I asked, gripping the phone. Do I just pay her off? No, Robert said sharply. You don't negotiate with terrorists. You need leverage. Real leverage. The prenup is a shield. We need a sword. You said she's been distant? Spending money? Yes. Is there anyone else? I paused. The thought had crossed my mind 1,000 times, but I had pushed it away. It seemed too cliché, too mundane. I don't know. Maybe. Find out, Robert said. If there is infidelity, the clause kicks in. It's ironclad. Section 14b. If she cheated, she gets nothing. No alimony. No house. Nothing but the clothes on her back. And if we can prove she plotted this, if we can prove malice, then we bury her. I hung up the phone and stared at the city skyline. Leverage. I needed to catch her, but I couldn't hire a private investigator to trail her. She would spot a tail in seconds, and it would look like harassment. I needed something indisputable, something she couldn't spin. I thought about the conversation the night before, the unlocked safe, the way she knew I was gone. She had been watching me, and in her arrogance, she had forgotten that I watched the house. I left the office at noon. I told my assistant I was feeling unwell. I drove back to the suburbs, parking the car down the street, around the bend where it couldn't be seen from the house. I walked the rest of the way, cutting through the wooded area that bordered the property. I felt ridiculous, a trespasser on my own land, sneaking through the rhododendrons like a thief. The house was quiet. Her car was in the driveway, but the blinds were drawn in the living room. I let myself in through the side door that led to the utility mudroom. I moved silently, grateful for the rubber soles of my shoes. I could hear music coming from the upper floor, upbeat, rhythmic, a workout playlist. She was exercising. I didn't go upstairs. I went down. The basement of the house was finished, featuring a home theater and a wine cellar, but my destination was the mechanical room behind the theater. This was the brain of the house. The server room. Why design this place? I wanted it to be smart in the truest sense. Automated climate, lighting, security, media. All of it ran through a central rack of servers that hummed quietly in the cool, climate-controlled darkness of this windowless room. I locked the door behind me. The room was bathed in the soft green and blue blinking lights of the server stacks. It smelled of ozone and dust-free air. This was my sanctuary. Melissa never came down here. To her, the internet was magic that came out of the air. She had no interest in the boxes that made it happen. I sat down at the terminal and woke the system up. The monitors flickered to life, displaying the dashboard of the house. System status, normal. Security, armed. I navigated to the security partition. I had updated the cameras 3 months ago to high-definition 4K units with enhanced audio pickup. They were discreet, recessed into the ceilings, looking like smoke detectors or sprinkler heads. I had installed them ostensibly for insurance purposes, to catalog the art and furniture in case of theft or fire. Melissa knew they were there, but she treated them like the thermostat, background noise she didn't understand. I pulled up the archive. The system stored 30 days of footage on a rolling loop. I started with the obvious. Yesterday, the hours before I came home, I scrubbed through the timeline. The living room camera feed appeared on the center screen. 2 p.m. The room was empty. 2:30 p.m. Melissa entered. She was wearing a robe. She paced around the room, talking on the phone. I put on the headphones and turned up the volume. He's going to be so surprised, she was saying, laughing. No, Greg, don't worry. I have the timeline worked out. He signs the Skyline deal today. That means the valuation spikes. Then I dropped the bomb. Greg. The name hung in the air of the server room. I didn't know a Greg. I fast-forwarded. 3:15 p.m. The doorbell rang. Melissa practically ran to the door. A moment later, she returned, but not alone. The man was younger than me, maybe 30. Fit, in that way that suggested he spent more time looking in a mirror than doing anything productive. He was wearing tight, athletic gear. A personal trainer? A tennis pro? He walked into my living room with a swagger that made my skin crawl. He didn't look around with respect. He looked around with appraisal, like a man checking the teeth of a horse he was about to buy. And then he kissed her. It wasn't a tentative greeting. It was possessive, familiar. Melissa melted into him. her hands running through his hair. I watched, a cold detachment settling over me. There it was. The infidelity. The Clause 14B trigger. I could clip this right now, send it to Robert, and the divorce would be over. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I needed to see the extent of it. They separated, and Greg walked over to the my bar cart, and poured himself a glass of my rare scotch. He took a sip, grimaced, and then added ice. The Philistin. So did you find it? Greg asked, sitting down on the sofa and putting his feet up on the coffee table. Melissa walked into the frame, holding the blue folder. The folder. My breath caught in my throat. Right where you said it would be, she said. He's so predictable. Same code for the alarm. Same code for the safe. 1-9-8-0, his birth year. God, he has no imagination. I watched as she pulled the document out. She read the cover page. Prenuptial agreement. Burn it, Greg said. Just get rid of it. She walked to the fireplace. I watched the scene I had only seen the aftermath of. She lit the corner of the document with a long match and tossed it into the grate. They stood there, watching my legal protection turn to ash, holding hands. It was grotesque, a romantic moment built on destruction. But then, the conversation shifted, and what happened next turned my blood from cold to frozen. Now that the paper is gone, we can focus on the accounts, Greg said. Did you get the dongle? Melissa reached in her pocket and pulled out a small, silver USB drive. I recognized it immediately. It was my two-factor authentication key for the corporate banking portal. I kept it in my desk drawer in the home office. I rarely used it at home, usually only for emergency payroll approvals. I grabbed it while he was in the shower this morning. Melissa said, "Do we really have to do this now? I want to celebrate." "Baby," Greg said, his voice dropping, sounding almost educational. "The divorce freezes everything. Once the lawyers get involved, the forensic accountants start sniffing around. We need to move the liquidity now. Today, before he gets home. We'll label it as consulting services for the shell company. By the time anyone notices, it'll be washed through the Caymans and sitting in your private account." He's an architect, Mel. He looks at buildings, not spreadsheets. He won't notice a few $100,000 missing from the operating capital until the quarterly audit. And by then, we'll be gone. I sat back in my chair, the headphones pressing against my ears. This wasn't just an affair. This was grand larceny. This was corporate espionage. Greg wasn't just a boy toy. He was the mastermind. Or at least, he thought he was. I watched as Melissa opened her laptop. Not mine, hers. She plugged in my security key. They sat together on the sofa, heads bent together. "Okay, log in," Greg instructed. "Transfer to Apex Solutions, LLC. Invoice number 404. Amount, let's do $75,000 for now. Keep it under the six-figure flag limit." I watched Melissa type. I watched her hit enter. "Done," she said, clapping her hands. "That was easy. Easy money," Greg grinned. He kissed her again. "You're a natural, babe. We're going to bleed him dry." I paused the video. My hand was shaking, hovering over the mouse. I felt a wave of nausea, followed immediately by a surge of adrenaline. They had stolen $75,000 yesterday. How much had they taken before? I minimized the video window and opened a new browser. I logged into the bank. My hands flew across the keyboard. I didn't need the USB key. I had the master admin codes memorized. I pulled up the transaction history. There it was. Yesterday, a wire transfer to Apex Solutions, LLC. $75,000. But I scrolled back. Last week, $45,000 to Structural Consulting Group. 2 weeks ago, $20,000 to Design Retainer. A month ago, $50,000 to Logistic Partners. I did the math in my head. In the last 3 months, they had siphoned nearly $250,000 from the firm's operating reserves. They were draining the company's blood, drop by drop. I sat in the dark, the green light of the server reflecting in my eyes. This changed everything. If I revealed the affair now, if I slapped the divorce papers on the table with the video of them kissing, they would run. They would take the money they had already stolen and vanish. And recovering stolen funds from a web of shell companies could take years and cost more in legal fees than the money was worth. No, I couldn't just divorce her. I had to trap her. I needed that money back. That money was the payroll for my staff. It was the deposit for the materials for the Skyline project. If that money was gone, the firm was insolvent. Melissa wasn't just ruining my marriage. She was bankrupting my employees. She was destroying the livelihoods of 50 people who worked for me. I looked at the screen again. Greg's face was frozen in a pixelated laugh. He thought he was smart. He thought I was a boring architect who didn't notice things. He didn't understand that architecture is all about noticing things. It's about seeing the crack in the foundation before the building falls. I needed a plan, a structure. I needed to lure them into a position where they felt so safe, so triumphant, that they would make a mistake. I needed them to bring the money back. Or, better yet, I needed to catch them in the act of something so undeniable that prison was the only option. I checked the time. It was 1 p.m. I'd been down here for an hour. I needed to get back to the office before anyone noticed I was gone. I needed to act normal. I downloaded the video clips. Not just the sex, the conversation about the money, the login, the transfer. I encrypted the files and uploaded them to a secure cloud server that only Robert and I could access. Then I backed them up to a physical drive, which I put in my pocket. I shut down the terminal. The screen went black. I stood up in the humming darkness. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the architect of their downfall. They wanted a war. No, war was too messy. War implied two sides fighting. This wasn't going to be a war. It was going to be a controlled demolition. I walked out of the server room, locking the heavy door behind me. I crept back up the stairs, listening. The house was silent again. The music had stopped. Maybe she had gone out. Maybe she was napping. I slipped out the side door and walked back to my car through the woods. The air felt different now. Crisp. Sharp. I took a deep breath. I drove back to the city, my mind constructing the next phase. I had to be patient. I had to let them steal a little more. I had to let the rope get long enough for them to hang themselves. When I walked back into my office, my assistant looked up. "Mr. Harper, you look better. Did the fresh air help?" He smiled at her. A genuine, cold smile. "Yes, Sarah, it helped a lot. Give me the financial audit logs for the last year. And call Robert. Tell him we need to set up a meeting. Not for a divorce settlement. For a sting operation." I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I pulled up the photo of Melissa that sat on the corner of my desk. A photo from our honeymoon in Italy. She looked so innocent then. So beautiful. I picked up the frame and looked at it one last time. Then I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and dropped it inside, face down. "Goodbye, Melissa," I whispered. Then I pulled up the blueprints for the Skyline Center. I had work to do. I had to build a masterpiece. And while I did that, I was going to dismantle her life, brick by brick. The phone rang. It was Melissa. "James, where are you? You were supposed to meet the landscaper at the house an hour ago." Her voice was demanding, entitled. She had no idea. "I'm sorry, honey," I said, my voice smooth, apologetic. "I got caught up in work. I'm just a boring architect, remember? I lost track of time." There was a huff of annoyance on the other end. "Fine. Just don't be late for dinner. I am ordering sushi. And don't forget to transfer money to the joint account. I need to pay the decorator." "Of course," I said. "I'll take care of it right away." I hung up. Transfer money. She was greedy. Her greed was her structural flaw. And I was going to put all the pressure right there until she snapped. I turned back to my screen, the cursor blinking on the digital ledger. The game had begun. And unlike Melissa, I didn't play for validation. I played for keeps. The sound of the espresso machine hissing in the kitchen was the only thing that felt familiar in a world that had tilted 45 degrees on its axis. It was Saturday morning. Usually, Saturdays were for site visits or golf with clients, followed by a quiet dinner. Now, Saturday was just another day of occupation. I stood in the kitchen of my own home, watching the dark liquid drip into the cup, feeling like a ghost haunting the premises. I had spent the last 3 nights in the guest room, listening to the muffled sounds of Melissa living her life as if I had already evaporated. She moved through the house with a lightness that was infuriating, humming tunes, talking loudly on the phone, planning a future that was being funded by the very man she was discarding. I took the coffee and walked to the kitchen island. On the marble surface lay a stack of mail. I flipped through it. Bills. Invitations to galas we would never attend together. And then the prop. I had spent the previous afternoon with Robert, my lawyer, and a forensic accountant crafting it. It was a masterpiece of forgery, not in the criminal sense, but in the theatrical one. It was a letter on heavy, cream-colored cardstock, embossed with the logo of a fictional private equity firm in Zurich, Vanguard Holdings. The content was simple but devastatingly enticing. It detailed a pending performance retention bonus tied to the Skyline Arts Center contract. The amount, $2.8 million. The payout date, 14 days from now. I placed the letter carefully on the counter, just under a utility bill, so the logo and the dollar sign were partially visible. It was a breadcrumb, a diamond-encrusted breadcrumb designed to catch the eye of a magpie. And Melissa was the greediest magpie I knew. James? Her voice cut through my thoughts. She walked into the kitchen, wearing tennis whites, looking vibrant and energetic. It was a stark contrast to the gray exhaustion I made sure to project. "Good morning," I said, my voice low. "I have a consultant coming over today," she announced, pouring herself a glass of water, "to appraise the furniture and the art. For the separation of assets. I don't want you hovering, James. It makes people uncomfortable." A consultant. I knew exactly who it was. The security logs from his server room didn't lie. Greg wasn't just her lover. He was her co-conspirator. He was the one who had likely coached her on how to access the accounts. Bringing him here, into my house, under the guise of professional services was a power play. It was a way to humiliate me in my own sanctuary. "I won't hover," I said, staring into my coffee. "I have work to do in the study. I'll stay out of your way." "Good. He'll be here at noon. Try to look presentable. You look like you haven't slept in a week." "I haven't," I muttered, turning away to hide the cold, sharp glint in my eyes. I went to my study, but I didn't work. I activated the remote monitor on my tablet. I had synced the audio from the kitchen and living room to my Bluetooth earpiece. I sat in my leather chair, staring at the wall, waiting for the performance to begin. At noon precisely, the doorbell rang. I heard Melissa's footsteps, the opening of the heavy oak door, and then the voice I recognized from the surveillance video. "Hey, beautiful," Greg said. The arrogance in his voice was palpable even through the digital feed. "Sure," Melissa hissed. "He's in the study. Keep it professional until we're sure he's not listening." I leaned back, closing my eyes. They were so confident, so incredibly sloppy. I heard them walk into the living room. I heard the sounds of them moving things around. Ostensibly, they were appraising. In reality, they were shopping. "I want this painting," Greg said. "The abstract one. It would look great in the new loft." "It's yours," Melissa replied. The lawyer said, "I can claim the contents of the house as part of the emotional distress settlement. James won't fight for a painting. He doesn't even like art. He just buys it as an investment." I gripped the armrest of my chair. That painting was a gift from my mentor, the man who taught me everything about architecture. I love that piece. But I let the anger wash over me and recede. Objects were replaceable. Dignity was not. I was about to buy my dignity back with interest. After an hour, I decided it was time to play my part. I needed to interact with them. I needed to sell the image of the defeated, oblivious husband. I walked out of the study, holding an empty mug. I shuffled slightly, rounding my shoulders. I entered the living room. Melissa and Greg were standing by the fireplace, the same fireplace where she had burned the prenup. Greg was holding a tablet, pretending to take notes. He looked up as I entered, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He was wearing a tight polo shirt and expensive loafers. He looked like a man who had never done a day of hard labor in his life. "Oh, James," Melissa said, her tone dripping with condescension. "This is Mr. Gregory. He's the appraiser." I looked at Greg. I extended my hand. "James Harper," I said. Greg looked at my hand for a second before taking it. His grip was aggressive, a petty attempt at dominance. "Nice to meet you, James. Lovely place you have here. Shame about the circumstances." "Yes," well, I said, pulling my hand back. "Life changes." I walked to the kitchen, feeling their eyes on my back. I could practically hear them communicating telepathically, mocking me. I went to the coffee machine, refilling my mug. I made sure to sigh loudly, the sound of a man carrying the weight of the world. Then, I turned around, leaning against the counter right next to where I had planted the letter. "Can I get you anything? Water?" Coffee? I asked. No, we're fine, Melissa said dismissively. Actually, James, could you maybe go check the garage? Mr. Gregory needs to see the vintage Porsche to assess its condition. She wanted me out of the house. Perfect. Sure, I said. I'll go open the garage door. I put my mug down. I put it down heavily, right on top of the utility bill that was covering the fake letter. The impact caused the papers to slide. The utility bill fell to the floor. The letter from Vanguard Holdings was now sitting there, exposed, the words retention bonus, $2,800,000 staring up at the ceiling like a neon sign. Oops, I muttered. I bent down to pick up the bill, but I deliberately ignored the letter. I left it there, stark and white against the dark marble. I grabbed the bill and shoved it into my pocket. I'll just head to the garage. I walked out. I didn't look back. I exited through the mudroom door, walked into the garage, and hit the button to open the main bay door. The loud mechanical whirring filled the space. I stood there, counted 10. Then I tapped my earpiece. The audio feed from the kitchen was crystal clear. Oh my God, I heard Melissa whisper. Her voice was trembling. What? Greg asked. What is it? Look at this. On the counter. James left it. I heard the rustle of paper. I visualized them huddled over the island, reading the text I had drafted with such care. Vanguard Holdings. Performance retention. 2.8 million? Greg's voice rose in pitch. Is this real? It looks real, Melissa said. Look at the date. The payout is in 2 weeks. It says it's for the successful signing of the Skyline contract. 2.8 million, Greg repeated. That's cash, Mel. That's liquid. If we file the divorce papers today. Melissa's voice trailed off. I could hear the gears turning in her head. The greed was overtaking the logic. If we file today, the separation date is locked, Greg finished for her. This money hasn't hit his account yet. If the separation date is today, this bonus counts as post-separation earnings. You might not get a dime of it. Are you sure? She asked. I'm pretty sure. My cousin went through this. The judge ruled that anything earned after the filing date was separate property. Mel, if you file now, you're walking away from $1.4 million. That's your half. Silence. The heavy, thick silence of avarice. I stood in the garage, leaning against the cold metal of the Porsche, a grim smile touching my lips. This was the trap. Greed makes people stupid. It makes them patient when they should be hasty, and hasty when they should be cautious. So what do we do? Melissa asked. We can't wait forever. I want him out. We don't wait forever, Greg said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We wait 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks. Let the money hit the account. Once it's in the joint checking, it's marital assets. Then we file. Then we take half of that, plus the house, plus the business share. 2 weeks? Melissa whined. I have to live with him for 2 more weeks? He's so depressing, Greg. He mopes around like a wounded dog. Think of the money, baby, Greg soothed. 1.4 million. That's the villa in Cabo. That's the boat. Just play nice for 14 days. Pretend you're hesitating. Pretend you need time to process the emotions. Give him a little hope. If he thinks there's a chance of reconciliation, he won't move money around. He'll be a good little boy. Give him hope. The words made my stomach turn. It was cruel. It was calculating. And it was exactly what I needed. Okay, Melissa sighed. I can do it. I'll tell him tonight. I'll tell him I need a cooling-off period before we make it official. Put the letter back, Greg commanded. Put exactly where it was. Don't let him know we saw it. I heard the rustle of paper again. I disconnected the earpiece. I had heard enough. They had taken the bait. Hook, line, and sinker. They were going to pause the legal proceedings. They were going to stay in the house, thinking they were playing me, while I gathered the evidence to bury them. I waited another 5 minutes, then walked back into the house. The garage is open, I announced, walking into the kitchen. The car is ready for inspection. Melissa and Greg were standing apart from each other. The letter was back under the stack of mail, though slightly askew. They looked at me with renewed interest. It wasn't the look of contempt anymore. It was the look of a butcher eyeing a particularly fat cow. Thank you, James, Melissa said. Her voice was softer, almost kind. It was sickening. Actually, Mr. Gregory and I were just talking. He thinks the valuation might take a few days. And I've been thinking. Yes, I asked, keeping my face neutral. Maybe we're rushing things, she said. I'm not saying I've changed my mind, but maybe we shouldn't rush to the lawyers this week. Maybe we should take a breath. For the sake of history. I looked at her. I looked at the beautiful face that hid such an ugly soul. I feigned a flicker of hope. I let my shoulders straighten, just a fraction. I would appreciate that, Mel, I said. I really would. Greg chimed in, clapping me on the shoulder. It's always good to be prudent, James. Divorce is messy. No need to light the match until you're sure. Right, I said. I'll show you the car now. As I led Greg to the garage, I felt a strange sense of power. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting. I was directing. They thought they were the predators, circling a wounded animal. They didn't realize they had just walked into a cage and locked the door from the inside. That evening, the dynamic in the house shifted. Melissa didn't retreat to her room immediately. She ordered dinner, sushi from our favorite place, and actually set the table for two. She poured me a glass of wine. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. She asked about my day. She asked about the Skyline project. So, the new project, she said, picking at a tuna roll. It must be very lucrative. It's good for the firm's reputation, I said carefully. The money is adequate, but the prestige is what matters. She nodded, hiding her disappointment that I didn't mention the bonus. You always were about the art, James. It's admirable. I watched her eat. I watched her smile. I knew that every kindness she showed me was calculated against a ledger in her head. She was being nice to me at a rate of roughly $100,000 a day. I went to bed early, citing exhaustion. But I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, my laptop open on my chest, the screen dimmed to the lowest setting. I was messaging Robert. It took the bait I typed. They're delaying the filing for 2 weeks to wait for the fake bonus. Good, Robert replied instantly. That gives us time. The forensic team has traced the shell company Greg is using. It's registered in Delaware, but the bank account is in the Cayman Islands. We need one more link. We need to prove that Melissa is authorizing the transfers knowingly. The video you have is good, but if we can get her to sign something, or initiate a transfer from her own device while you are confirmed to be elsewhere, that's the nail in the coffin. I have an idea. I typed back. What is it? I'm going to give her access, I wrote. I'm going to ask her to help me with some administrative work for the firm. I'm going to ask her to pay a vendor. If she uses that access to pay herself instead, while I'm at a public event with 50 witnesses, she can never claim I did it or that she didn't know what she was doing. It's risky, James. If she drains too much, I'll limit the account, I assured him. But I need her to commit the crime when she thinks she's safe. The next few days were a surreal blur of domestic theater. Melissa played the role of the conflicted wife. She stopped inviting Greg over, at least when I was there. She even made coffee one morning. It was terrifying how easily she lied. If I hadn't seen the footage, if I hadn't heard the tapes, I might have believed her. I might have thought there was a chance to save us. That was the scariest part, realizing how much of our marriage might have been just this, a performance to get access to a lifestyle she felt she deserved. On Wednesday, I put the next phase of the plan into motion. I came home early, looking frazzled. I threw my briefcase on the sofa and loosened my tie. What's wrong? Melissa asked. She was reading a magazine, looking relaxed. My assistant is out sick, I said, pacing the room. And I have the gala tonight. The mayor's going to be there. I can't miss it. But I have these vendor payments that have to go out by 5 o'clock or the steel delivery gets delayed. I looked at her, desperation in my eyes. Mel, can you help me? You remember how to use the portal? You used to do the books in the early days. She hesitated. I could see the suspicion warring with the opportunity. I could try, she said slowly, but I haven't done it in years. It's easy, I said. Here. I handed her my laptop. I logged in, typing the password slowly so she could see it. I opened the banking portal. Just pay these 3 invoices, I said, pointing to the screen. That's it. I have to go change. The car is coming in 20 minutes. I ran upstairs. I showered and changed into my tuxedo in record time. When I came back down, Melissa was sitting at the kitchen island, typing. Is it working? I asked, adjusting my cufflinks. Yes, she said, not looking up. I paid the steel company and a glass supplier. Thank you, I said, walking over and kissing her on the cheek. It felt like kissing a statue, You saved my life, Mel. I really appreciate it. I have to run, I said, checking my watch. Don't wait up. I grabbed my coat and walked out the door. The town car was waiting. As I settled in the back seat, I pulled out my phone. I didn't open my email or my messages. I opened a remote desktop app that mirrored my laptop screen, the one Melissa was currently using. I watched in real time. She waited exactly 3 minutes after the door closed. Then, she opened a new tab. She didn't log out. She navigated to the Transfer Funds section. She hesitated for a moment. I watched the cursor hover. She was thinking about the bonus. She was thinking about the good behavior. But the temptation of an open vault was too strong. It was pathological. She selected the operating reserve account. She typed in the recipient, Apex Solutions. She typed in the amount, $45,000. Small enough, she probably thought, to go unnoticed amidst the large steel orders I had mentioned. She hit submit. A text message popped up on the screen, the two-factor authentication code sent to my phone. I had anticipated this. I forwarded the code to her phone automatically using a script I had set up, making it look like it came from the bank. She typed in the code. Transaction approved. I took a screenshot on my phone, then another. I had the timestamp. I had the geolocation of my phone, downtown, and her location, home. I had the mirroring log proving it was her keystrokes. She closed the browser. She wiped the history. She shut the laptop. I sat back in the dark car as the city lights blurred past the window. She had just stolen $45,000 from a man she thought she was reconciling with. She had looked me in the eye, accepted my trust, and used it to rob me. The last lingering shred of guilt I felt about destroying her evaporated. There was no redemption for this. There was only consequences. I arrived at the gala. I shook hands. I smiled. I drank sparkling water and discussed zoning laws with the mayor. I was the perfect image of a successful, composed architect. Inside, I was counting down the hours. 2 weeks. They wanted 2 weeks to get the fake bonus. I would give them one. Just enough time for them to feel secure. Just enough time for them to spend money they didn't have on credit, anticipating the windfall. When I got home that night, the house was dark. Melissa was asleep in the guest room. She had moved back there out of respect for my space during the reconciliation. I walked into the kitchen. My laptop was sitting exactly where I had left it. I opened it. I checked the browser history. Clean. She thought she was a ghost. I went to the server room one last time that night. I checked the cameras. After the transfer, she had called Greg. I did it. She had whispered into the phone, pacing the living room. I took 45. He didn't notice a thing. He was so grateful, Greg. It was pathetic. And the bonus? Greg had asked. Still coming. We just have to hold the line for 10 more days. Then we take it all. I listened to her laugh. It was a light, musical sound. The sound of a woman who thought she had won the lottery. I turned off the monitor. Enjoy the money, Melissa, I said to the empty room. It's the most expensive $45,000 you will ever spend. I went upstairs to the master bedroom, my bedroom. I locked the door. I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The structure was sound. The trap was sprung. Now all I had to do was wait for the walls to close in. The knot in my tie was a perfect Windsor. I checked it 3 times in the mirror of the hallway powder room. Symmetry, balance, precision. These were the principles I lived by, the principles that had built skyscrapers and museums. And today, they were the principles that would dismantle a lie. I adjusted the cuffs of my shirt, feeling the cool metal of the cufflinks against my wrist. They were a gift from Melissa for our 5th anniversary. I wore them today, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder of the investment I had made and the return I was about to collect. The house was empty. Melissa had left an hour earlier, claiming she had a Pilates class before her appointment. We both knew where she was going. She was going to meet her lawyer, a shark named Marcus Sterling, whose billboards littered the highway with slogans about getting what you deserve. She was going to prep for the kill. She was going to walk into that conference room expecting to carve up my life's work like a Thanksgiving turkey. I picked up my briefcase. It was heavier than usual. Inside, there were no blueprints, no sketches, no contract for steel or glass. There was only a laptop and a single, encrypted hard drive. The demolition charges. I walked out to the car, the morning air crisp and indifferent. As I drove toward the city, the Chicago skyline rose up to meet me. I looked at the silhouette of the buildings, some of them mine, and felt a strange sense of calm. Panic is for those who are unprepared. Fear is for those who don't know the outcome. I knew exactly how today would end. I had designed it. The offices of Sterling and Associates were located in a glass and steel monolith that screamed intimidation. The lobby was all polished granite and aggressive modern art, designed to make you feel small, to make you feel like your bank account was insufficient. I took the elevator to the 35th floor. The doors slid open to reveal a reception area that smelled of expensive espresso and fear. My lawyer, Robert, was already there. He was sitting in one of the low leather chairs, reading an architectural digest. Robert was the opposite of Sterling. He was quiet, unassuming, a man who wore off-the-rack suits and drove a Volvo. But he possessed a mind like a steel trap. He looked up as I approached, closing the magazine. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded. "Is everything in place?" "The forensic team is on standby if we need them," Robert said, standing up. "And I have the digital affidavit from a notary. We're good. Remember, James, let them talk. Let them dig the hole. We don't interrupt until they're standing at the bottom of it." We were ushered into the main conference room. It was a vast space with a view of the lake, dominated by a table long enough to land a small aircraft on. At the far end, like royalty holding court, sat Melissa and Marcus Sterling. Sterling was exactly as I expected. He was a man who clearly spent as much time in a tanning bed as he did in a law library. His suit was a shade of blue that was just a little too bright, his watch a little too large. He didn't stand up when we entered. He just gestured to the empty chairs opposite them. Melissa wouldn't look at me. She was wearing a white dress, modest, high-necked. She was playing the part of the aggrieved, innocent wife. She had a tissue crumpled in her hand, a prop for the tears that would inevitably come when the performance required them. "Mr. Harper," Sterling boomed, his voice filling the room. "Thank you for joining us. I hope we can resolve this amicably, though given the resistance we've encountered so far, I have my doubts." I sat down, placing my briefcase on the table. I didn't open it. I folded my hands on top of the leather and looked at him. I didn't speak. Robert cleared his throat. "We are here to listen to your proposal, Mr. Sterling." Sterling smirked. He opened a thick file in front of him. "Proposal is a polite word. Let's call them requirements. My client, Mrs. Harper, has suffered significant emotional distress due to your client's neglect, financial control, and psychological abuse. She has sacrificed her prime years supporting his career, acting as a hostess, a confidant, and a partner. Now that Mr. Harper has achieved his big break with the Skyline project, he seeks to discard her. We won't allow that." He slid a piece of paper across the polished mahogany. "Here is the breakdown," Sterling continued. "We are asking for the marital home, fully paid off. We are asking for a lump sum of $5 million. We are asking for permanent spousal support of $30,000 a month. And, of course, we are laying claim to 50% of Mr. Harper's equity in Harper Architecture, as well as 50% of all pending bonuses and contracts signed during the marriage, including, specifically, the retention bonus from Vanguard Holdings." I kept my face impassive, but inside, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. They had named the Vanguard bonus. They had put it on the record. They had bitten the apple. Robert picked up the paper, putting on his reading glasses. He hummed softly, as if reading a menu at a diner. "Ambitious," he said simply. "It's fair," Sterling snapped. "In fact, it's generous. If we go to trial, I will put Mrs. Harper on the stand. She will testify about the nights she spent alone. She will testify about the coldness, the emotional isolation. Juries don't like cold, rich architects, Mr. Harper. They like weeping wives." Melissa sniffed loudly, dabbing at her dry eyes with the tissue. "I just want what's fair, James," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I gave you everything." I looked at her, really looked at her. For a moment, the overlay of the past, the memories of our wedding, the vacations, the laughter, flickered over her face. But then I saw the calculation in her eyes. I saw the look she had given Greg in the living room while they drank my scotch. The overlay vanished, leaving only the reality of the stranger sitting across from me. "Is that all?" I asked. My voice was calm, steady. It startled Sterling. He expected shouting. He expected denial. For now, Sterling said, leaning back, unless you want to discuss the legal fees, which you will also be paying. Robert took off his glasses. He placed the paper back on the table. Well, Marcus, that is certainly a comprehensive list. However, it seems to rely entirely on the premise that this is a standard dissolution of marriage, governed solely by state statutes regarding marital property. It is, Sterling said. It isn't, Robert corrected gently. As you know, Mr. and Mrs. Harper signed a prenuptial agreement 10 years ago, an agreement that explicitly waives spousal support and keeps business assets separate. Sterling laughed. A loud, barking sound. The mythical prenup. Melissa told me about that. She also told me that Mr. Harper was very careless with his paperwork. There is no original copy, Robert. It was lost. Without the original, wet ink document, it's a ghost. It doesn't exist. Melissa looked up then, a flash of triumph in her eyes. She believed this. She believed the fire in the living room had consumed my defense. Lost, I repeated. Is that what you told him, Melissa? That was lost? She lifted her chin defiantly. I haven't seen it in years, James. You probably threw it out. You never cared about our paperwork. Robert sighed. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sleek, silver laptop. He opened it, the screen facing us. He typed a few keys, then spun the laptop around so it faced Sterling and Melissa. Technology is a wonderful thing, Marcus, Robert said. You see, when James founded his firm, he became very interested in redundancy. Backups. Secure off-site storage. The prenuptial agreement wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a digital asset. On the screen, a high-resolution scan of the document appeared. It showed the signatures. It showed the notary stamp. But more importantly, it showed a sidebar of metadata. This document, Robert explained, pointing to the screen, was scanned and uploaded to a secure, blockchain-verified legal repository on the day of signing. The timestamp is immutable. The hash key verifies that the document has not been altered by a single pixel since 2014. Under Illinois commerce laws, and specifically under the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act, this certified digital record is admissible as primary evidence, indistinguishable from the original. Sterling stared at the screen. The smile didn't leave his face, but it froze. It became a rictus. He leaned forward, squinting at the metadata. Nice try, he said, his voice tighter. But I can challenge the chain of custody. I can challenge the digital signature. It will take months, years. And in the meantime, I'll drag your client's reputation through the mud. Melissa looked nervous now. She tugged on Sterling's sleeve. Marcus? What does that mean? It means nothing, Sterling lied to her. It's a delay tactic. It's not a delay, Robert said. It's the baseline. But you're right, Marcus. Prenups can be challenged. They can be argued. That's why James included a specific clause. Section 14b. I watched Melissa. She went pale. She knew the clause. She had laughed about it with Greg. The infidelity clause. Section 14b. Robert recited from memory. In the event of verified extramarital affairs, the offending party forfeits all claims to lump sum settlements and spousal support, receiving only personal effects and assets acquired prior to the marriage. Sterling waved his hand. Allegations. You have no proof. My client has been faithful. She has been a saint. I stood up. The movement was sudden enough that Sterling flinched. I walked over to the window and looked out at the lake. Faithful, I said. That's a strong word. I turned back to face them. I nodded to Robert. Robert hit a key on a laptop. The image of the prenup vanished. A video player opened. The first video was silent. It was from the living room camera. It showed Melissa and Greg. It wasn't the kiss. I didn't need the kiss yet. It was the conversation. The audio filled the quiet conference room. He's such a loser. Melissa's voice rang out, clear and sharp. He actually thinks I'm going to stay? Once the check clears, I'm gone. Greg, baby, did you look at the listings in Cabo? Yeah, Greg's voice answered. The villa is $2 million. We take him for $5 million, buy the place, and live like kings. Melissa gasped. She put her hand over her mouth. Her eyes darted around the room, as if looking for the camera that was filming her right now. Sterling froze. He looked at the screen, then at his client. His jaw tightened. That could be anyone, Sterling stammered, though his confidence was bleeding out rapidly. That's out of context. That's... Robert clicked the next file. This one was visual. It showed Greg entering the house. It showed the physical intimacy. It wasn't explicit. I had spared the lawyer the graphic details, but it was undeniable. The body language, the touching, the familiarity. It was the behavior of lovers, not a woman and her appraiser. And here, Robert narrated coolly, we have the dates. These meetings occurred while James was at work. Over 20 occurrences in the last 2 months. We have the log of Mr. Gregory's car entering the community. We have credit card receipts for dinners. Hotels. Melissa was shaking. She wasn't acting anymore. James, she choked out. James, stop it. But we aren't done, I said. I walked back to the table and leaned over it, my hands flat on the polished wood. You see, Marcus, I said, addressing the lawyer, infidelity is a civil matter. It breaches the contract. It kills the alimony. It kills the settlement. If we stopped here, Melissa would walk away with nothing but her clothes. I paused. I let the silence stretch. I saw Sterling calculating. He was realizing that his contingency fee just evaporated. He was realizing he was fighting a losing battle. But we aren't stopping here, I whispered. Because Melissa didn't just break her vows. She broke the law. Sterling's head snapped up. Excuse me? Robert closed the video player. He opened a spreadsheet. It was a complex web of transactions, highlighted in red. Embezzlement, Robert said. Fraud. Grand larceny. That's a lie. Melissa shrieked. She stood up, knocking her chair back. I never stole anything. You gave me that money. It was for the house. Sit down, Melissa, Sterling hissed. He looked at the screen with the eyes of a man, seeing a train coming at him in a tunnel. Robert pointed to the rows of data. Here we have a series of wire transfers from Harper Architecture's operating accounts to a shell company called Apex Solutions. The total amount is $240,000 over 3 months. James signed off on those. Melissa cried. He was careless. He didn't check the invoices. Did he? Robert asked. He opened the final video file. It was the screen recording from the night of the gala. The split screen showing Melissa's face in the glow of the laptop, and the mirrored desktop showing her navigating to the banking portal. The timestamp was visible. The text message with the authentication code was visible. And here is the kicker. Marcus, I said softly. See that letter on the counter next to her? The one about the Vanguard bonus? Sterling squinted at the video. Yes, that bonus doesn't exist, I said. There is no Vanguard holdings. There is no $2.8 million. It was a canary trap. I planted that letter to see if she would delay the divorce to get a piece of it. She did. But more importantly, she used my credentials, unlawfully obtained, to transfer $45,000 to herself, believing she was stealing from a future pot of gold. I looked at Sterling. That is wire fraud, Marcus. That is unauthorized access to a computer system. That is theft over $100,000, which is a Class 1 felony in Illinois. Mandatory prison time. And since she transferred the money to an account controlled by her lover, Mr. Gregory, it's also conspiracy. The room was deathly silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and Melissa's ragged breathing. She looked like a trapped animal. She looked at Sterling, begging for a lifeline. Marcus, do something. Tell them they're lying. Sterling slowly closed the file in front of him. He pushed his chair back. He looked at Melissa with a mixture of disgust and self-preservation. You told me there was no prenup, he said, his voice ice cold. You told me the funds were marital assets. You told me you had authorization. I did. I mean, James said. Melissa stammered, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. Mrs. Harper, Sterling said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. I cannot represent a client who utilizes my services to further a criminal enterprise. You lied to me. You compromised my firm. He looked at Robert, then at me. Gentlemen, he said, nodding stiffly, I will be filing a motion to withdraw as counsel immediately. I suggest you contact the district attorney. Good day. Marcus. Melissa screamed, reaching for him. You can't leave me. Sterling pulled his arm away as if she were contagious. He didn't look back. He walked out of the conference room, the heavy glass door closing behind him with a soft thud. And then there were 3. Melissa stood there, swaying slightly. She looked at the empty chair where her defender had been. She looked at the screen where the evidence of her guilt was frozen in high definition. Then, slowly, she looked at me. Her mask was gone. The arrogance, the entitlement, the cruelty, it had all been stripped away, leaving a terrified, small woman who realized she had gambled her life and lost. "James," she whispered. Her voice was unrecognizable. "James, please." It was Greg. "He made me do it. He said you wouldn't notice. He said you owed us." "Owed us?" I asked, walking around the table until I stood right in front of her. "I owed you? I gave you a life most people only see in movies. I gave you a home. I gave you loyalty. And you felt owed?" "I'm sorry," she sobbed, reaching for my hand. I stepped back. I didn't want her to touch me. "I'm so sorry. I'll fix it. I'll give the money back. Just don't send me to jail. Please, James. I can't go to jail." I looked at her. Part of me, the part that had loved her once, felt a twinge of pity. But then I remembered the burning prenup. I remembered the laughter as they planned to bleed me dry. I remembered the boring architect comment. Robert spoke up from the other end of the table. He slid a single, thin document across the mahogany. "This is a settlement agreement," Robert said. "It's very simple. It states that you admit to the infidelity. It states that you waive all claims to the house, the business, and any spousal support. It states that you will return the stolen funds immediately." Melissa looked at the paper. She looked at me, hope flaring in her eyes. "If I sign this, you won't call the police?" I looked down at her. "If you sign this," I said, "I will not file criminal charges for the theft. I will classify the stolen money as a bad debt and write it off, provided you return what is left. You will walk out of here with your personal items, your clothes, your jewelry, your car. Nothing else." She nodded frantically, grabbing a pen from the table. Yes, I'll sign. I'll leave today. I promise." She signed the paper. Her hand was shaking so badly the signature was barely legible, but it was there. She pushed it toward Robert, as if it were a shield protecting her from the fire. "Is it done?" she asked, wiping her nose. "Can I go?" "One more thing," I said. She froze. "What?" "Greg," I said. "What about him?" "He's a co-conspirator," I said. "The money went to his account. Even if I don't charge you, the trail leads to him. He spent most of it," she whispered. "He has debts. James, he's dangerous. He'll be furious if I come back with nothing." "That's not my problem," I said. "But here is the reality, Melissa. I'm an architect. I build things, but I also know how to demolish them. I bought the debt on Greg's gym this morning." Her eyes widened. "You what?" "His loans were in default. The bank was happy to sell the paper to a private investor. I now own a mortgage on his business and his equipment. And since I know he used stolen corporate funds to pay his lease last month, well, let's just say his gym is closing today." Melissa stared at me with horror. "You destroyed him." "I didn't destroy him," I said coldly. "I just removed the supports. Gravity did the rest." I picked up my briefcase. I felt lighter. The weight was gone. "You have 24 hours to vacate the house," I said. "Don't take anything that isn't on the list. My security team will be there to supervise your packing." I turned to walk away. "James?" she called out. I stopped at the door, my hand on the handle. "What happens to me?" she asked. Her voice was small, like a child lost in a supermarket. "I don't know, Melissa," I said, not looking back. "And frankly, I can't afford to care." I opened the door and walked out. Robert followed me. We walked through the silent lobby, past the receptionist who looked at us with wide eyes. We stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, shutting out the floor where my marriage had just been legally and surgically terminated, Robert looked at me. "That went well," he said. I adjusted my cufflink. It was symmetrical. It was precise. It went exactly according to plan, I said. The elevator descended, taking me back to the ground floor, back to the foundation, where I could start building something new. Something that wouldn't crumble. But the story wasn't quite over. I knew that. Melissa was desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. And Greg. Greg was about to find out that his gym was locked, his accounts were frozen, and his meal ticket had just bounced. I walked out of the building into the harsh sunlight of the Chicago afternoon. I took a deep breath. The air tasted like concrete and exhaust, but to me, it tasted like freedom. I got in my car. I checked my phone. One notification from the security system at home. Alert! Front door unlocked. My security team was already there. They were changing the locks. I put the car in gear. The demolition was complete. Now, it was time to clear the debris. The sound of packing tape ripping off a plastic dispenser is a uniquely violent noise. It is a harsh, serrated screech that tears through the air, signaling the end of something. In my living room, the sound repeated in a steady, rhythmic cadence, like the ticking of a doomsday clock. Zizzip, snap, zizzip, snap. I stood on the balcony of the second floor, looking down into the atrium. The space, usually so pristine and curated, was a landscape of cardboard boxes and bubble wrap. My security team, led by a stoic man named Miller, stood by the walls with their arms crossed, silent sentinels ensuring that only personal items made it into those boxes. Melissa was down there. She wasn't wearing the silk robes or the tennis whites anymore. She was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked smaller. Without the armor of my money, without the borrowed confidence of her status, she seemed to have shrunk physically. She was moving frantically, throwing clothes into boxes, stopping occasionally to wipe her face with the back of her hand. I walked down the stairs. The sound of my footsteps on the floating oak treads made her freeze. She looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, swollen from crying, but there was still a flicker of that old defiance, a desperate spark trying to catch fire in a vacuum. "You're enjoying this," she said, her voice raspy, watching me pack my life in a cardboard. I reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped. "I'm not enjoying it, Melissa. I'm supervising it. There's a difference. Enjoyment implies emotion. This is just logistics. It's site clearance." "Site clearance," she spat the words out. "I'm your wife, James, not a derelict building." "Ex-wife," I corrected gently. "As of the signatures yesterday. And as for the building analogy, well, you were the one who compromised the structural integrity. I'm just removing the hazard." She turned back to a pile of handbags on the sofa. She reached for a black leather tote, the gold hardware gleaming under the chandelier. It was a limited edition piece, worth more than most people's cars. Miller, the security head, stepped forward. "Excuse me, Mrs. Harper. That item is on the exclusion list." Melissa clutched the bag to her chest. "This is mine. He gave it to me for Christmas." "Actually," I said, stepping closer, "if you check the audit logs, which I did this morning, that bag was purchased using the corporate credit card. You listed it as client gift in the expense report. Since you're not a client, and it was bought with firm money, it is company property. It stays." "You can't be serious," she whispered, her knuckles turning white on the leather handles. "It's a purse, James. You have millions. You're going to petty over a purse." "It's not the bag," I said. "It's the principle. It's the audit trail. I have to explain that expense to the IRS. Put it down, Mel." She stared at me, trembling. For a second, I thought she might throw it at me. Then, with a guttural sob of frustration, she dropped the bag onto the floor. It landed with a heavy thud. "I hate you," she hissed. "I know," I replied. "But that hate is free. It doesn't cost me a dime. Unlike your love." The packing continued for another hour. It was a surgical extraction. The jewelry I had bought her, marital gifts, she kept those. But the things she had siphoned, the electronics, the art, the high-end appliances she tried to claim, they stayed. By the time she was done, she had 4 large suitcases and 3 boxes. That was it. 10 years of marriage, distilled down to the back seat of a sedan. Miller escorted her to the door. I followed, keeping my distance. I wanted to see the end. I wanted to see the door close. She stopped at the threshold. The afternoon sun was blindingly bright, a cruel contrast to the dark collapse of her world. She turned to me one last time. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked. The defiance was gone now, replaced by a cold, creeping panic. "I have no cash. You froze the accounts." "You have the $45,000 you stole," I reminded her. "Or what's left of it. I imagine you spent some. But that should be enough for a deposit on an apartment, or a very long stay at a motel." "Greg," She started, then stopped. She looked at me, searching for a reaction. Greg will help me. He loves me. He's not like you. He doesn't care about money. I almost laughed. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. Is that so? I asked. Well, you should definitely go to him. I'm sure he'll be thrilled to see you. Just give him my regards. I hope you die alone in this cold, empty house, she said. I might, I said, but I'll die solvent, and I'll die with a clear conscience. Goodbye, Melissa. Miller closed the heavy oak door. The latch clicked shut. The sound was final. I stood there in the foyer, listening to the silence rushing back in to fill the space she had vacated. It didn't feel empty. It felt cleansed. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of lemon polish and possibility. I turned to Miller. Change the codes. Rekey the perimeter. And tell the staff they can have the rest of the day off. Yes, Mr. Harper, Miller said. And the items she tried to take? Donate them, I said, walking toward the kitchen. Donate all of it. I don't want a single trace left. I didn't see what happened next, but I heard about it. In the age of digital information, nothing stays hidden for long, especially when you own the debt of the man involved. Melissa drove straight to Body/Tech, Greg's boutique gym in the trendy part of the West Loop. She probably imagined a tearful reunion, a romantic rescue where they would drive off into the sunset to spend the scraps of her stolen money. She didn't know that the sunset had been canceled. When she pulled up to the gym, the lights were off. That was the first sign. It was 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. The place should have been thumping with bass-heavy music and filled with clients. Instead, it was dark, and there was a padlock on the door. A bright orange notice was pasted to the glass. Notice of seizure. Property repossessed by creditor. I could imagine her standing there, the wind whipping her hair, reading the legal jargon. She wouldn't have understood the statute numbers, but she would have understood the word closed. She called Greg. I know this because I had a copy of the call log from the forensic file later. She called him 12 times in 10 minutes. Finally, he answered. He wasn't at the gym. He was at his apartment, packing. He had received the notification from the bank, my bank, that morning. The call on his business loans had been accelerated due to fraudulent activity detected in the cross-referenced accounts. His lease was terminated. His equipment was being auctioned. He was toxic. Greg, where are you? Melissa had cried into the phone. The gym is closed. There's a sign. I know the gym is closed, Melissa. Greg shouted back. I could picture him, sweating, panicked, throwing his protein powders into a duffel bag. Your husband bought the note. He bought the debt. He shut me down. What? He knew. He knew everything. The money you transferred? The 45 grand? The lawyers traced it to my account. They froze my personal assets, pending an investigation into conspiracy to commit wire fraud. I can't access my money, Mel. But I'm here, Melissa stammered. I left him. I signed the papers. I have the suitcases. I'm coming to you. There was a silence on the line. A long, heavy silence. Don't, Greg said. His voice was cold. It was the voice of a parasite that realized the host was dead. What do you mean? I mean, don't come here. I'm leaving town. I'm going to stay with my brother in Arizona until this blows over. Take me with you, she pleaded. We have the 45,000. Well, I have some of it left. You have nothing. Greg snapped. You're a liability, Melissa. You're broke. You have no settlement, no alimony, and you have a pissed-off architect on your tail who has deeper pockets than God. I can't be seen with you. If they link us any tighter, I go to jail. But you said you loved me, she screamed. You said we were partners. I said we were going to be rich, Greg corrected. Plans changed. You screwed up. You got caught. Don't call me again. Click. She stood on the sidewalk, surrounded by the reflection of the city she thought she was going to conquer. She had burned her marriage for a man who didn't even want her, only the lifestyle she could provide. Now, she had neither. I sat in my study, watching the sun go down over the ravine. My phone buzzed. It was a text from the private investigator I had retained just to ensure the order of events. Subject, Greg. Status, departed. Heading I-55 south. Subject, Melissa. Status, sitting in car outside location. Crying. Proceeding to check into Motel 6 on the outskirts. I put the phone down. It was done. The equation was balanced. The next 6 months were the busiest of my life, and the happiest. Without the constant drain of Melissa's spending and the emotional toll of her resentment, I found a new gear in my work. The Skyline Arts Center broke ground in the spring. It was a massive undertaking, a cathedral of glass and light that would redefine the city's cultural district. I was on site every day. I loved the smell of wet concrete and welding ozone. I loved the precision of it. I reorganized the firm. I fired the comptroller who had been too lazy to spot the irregularities in the accounts and hired a forensic team to overhaul our security. We became tighter, leaner, more efficient. I also renovated the house. I didn't tear it down. The bones were good, but I stripped the interior. The white boucle sofas were gone, replaced with rich, warm leather. The cold marble in the kitchen was replaced with slate. I turned the guest room, my prison cell for those few weeks, into a library. I filled the shelves with books I had always wanted to read, but never had the time for. I started cooking again. Simple things. Steaks. Pasta. I invited friends over. Real friends, not the social climbers Melissa had cultivated. We drank wine that cost $20 a bottle and tasted better than the $1,000 vintages because we drank it with laughter, not pretense. I didn't date. I wasn't ready. I was enjoying the solitude. I was learning to be James Harper again, not Melissa's husband or the provider. I was just a man building a life he actually wanted to live in. But the final chapter wasn't written until late October. I was in the city for a meeting with the zoning board. It had run late, and I was walking back to my car, enjoying the crisp autumn air. The leaves were turning gold and crimson, reflecting in the puddles on the sidewalk. I decided to stop for a coffee. There was a small, generic chain cafe on the corner, the kind that smells of burnt beans and sugary pastries. I usually avoided them, but I needed caffeine. I walked in. The bell above the door jingled. The place was relatively empty. I walked to the counter, checking emails on my phone. "Can I help you?" a voice asked. It was a voice I knew. It was a voice that used to demand trips to Paris and diamonds for birthdays. But it was different now. It was flat, tired, servile. I looked up. Melissa was standing behind the register. She was wearing a green apron with a name tag that said Mel. Her hair was pulled back in a regulation ponytail. She wasn't wearing makeup. The lines around her eyes were deeper, etched by stress and sleepless nights. She looked 10 years older than the woman who had sat in my conference room. She froze when she saw me. Her hand, hovering over the POS screen, trembled. "James," she breathed. I looked at her. I waited for the anger to rise. I waited for the resentment, the urge to mock her, the urge to ask her how Greg was doing. But nothing came. I felt nothing. No hot, no love, no pity. Just a mild surprise, like seeing an old acquaintance you had forgotten about. She was just a person, a stranger in a green apron. "Hello, Melissa," I said. My voice was calm, conversational. She swallowed hard. She looked down at the counter, unable to meet my eyes. I'm working here. For now. Until, It's honest work," I said. "I live in a studio apartment," she blurted out, as if she needed to confess, or perhaps looking for me to save her. "It's in a bad part of town. The bus ride takes an hour." She looked up at me then, her eyes wet. "It's hard, James. It's really hard." I looked at the menu board. "I'll have a black coffee. Medium. To go." She blinked. The rejection was subtle, but absolute. I wasn't asking about her life. I wasn't offering a lifeline. I was ordering a beverage. "Right?" she whispered, her shoulders slumping. "Medium black coffee. That's $2.50. I pulled out my wallet. I took out a $5 bill and placed it on the counter. "Keep the change," I said. I didn't say it with malice. I said it because I didn't want the coins weighing down my pocket. She took the money. Her fingers brushed mine for a millisecond. Her skin was rough, dry. The manicures were a thing of the past. She turned to the machine, poured the coffee, and put a lid on it. She handed it to me. Her hand was shaking. "James," she said, as I took the cup, "I really am sorry. For everything." I paused. I looked at her one last time. I saw the regret. I saw the realization of what she had thrown away. She had traded a palace for a gym rat who abandoned her. And now she was serving coffee to the man she had called boring. "I know you are," I said softly. but sorry is a currency that doesn't buy back time. I turned and walked toward the door. James, she called out, a desperate edge to her voice. Are you happy? I stopped. I pushed the door open. The cool wind rushed in, smelling of rain and city streets. I looked out at the skyline, at the steel skeletons of buildings rising into the clouds. I thought about my quiet house, my library, my work. I turned back to her. She was watching me with bated breath, waiting for an answer that might validate her existence. I'm free, Melissa, I said, and that is worth more than happy. I walked out. I let the door close behind me. The bell jingled one last time, a cheerful sound that marked the end of the scene. I walked down the street, the coffee warming my hand. I took a sip. It was bitter, burnt, and mediocre. But as I walked toward my car, toward my future, it tasted like the best damn coffee I had ever had. I reached my car, tossed the empty cup into a trash can, and got in. I checked the time. I had a site meeting in 20 minutes. The foundation for the main tower was being poured today. Concrete and rebar. Solid. Belmano. I started the engine. The GPS chimed, asking for a destination. Home, I said. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly where that was.